On this week's episode of the QC Step Podcast, I will share some job leads with you, give you more information on the sessions and the speakers for the Day of Transition 2013, and I will give you 4 tips on following up with employers. It's the week of October 21st through the 25th, and this is the QC Step Podcast. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the QC Step Podcast. My name is Corey Finneran. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just go to qcstep.com/Facebook, and we are at QC Step on Twitter and Instagram. And by connecting with us through social networking accounts, you will get the most current job leads, employment tips, and other information. As I said in the intro, today I'm going to talk with you about the Day of Transition 2013, and I will give you 4 tips on following up with employers after you've turned in your applications. But before I do those things, let's take a look at this week's job leads. I post these job leads to qcstep.com every Monday morning, and there are links to the online applications for the businesses that have them. We'll start things off by looking at the Hy-Vee food stores. The Milan store is hiring courtesy clerks. The Rock Island store is looking for a night stalker, and this is a lead probably for the graduates. The YMCA in Moline is looking for detail and light maintenance worker, and you need to apply in person, and that's at 2040 53rd Street in Moline. Over the last few weeks, I told you that you can assume that every retail business is hiring for their seasonal positions. And typically, they don't advertise these positions. So while I only had a few job leads for you this week, know that most, if not all, retail businesses are hiring right now. And also, fast food businesses are hiring all the time. So don't hesitate to apply with really any business this time of year. I do have a few leads for our graduates. The UPS is looking for driver helpers. YRC Freight is looking for dock workers. And the Family Dollar in Rock Island is looking for customer service associates. If you would like help with any of these applications and you would like more information on these job leads, then email me info@qcstep.com and I will pass it on to Gary or Carrie depending on which school you go to. The Day of Transition 2013 is now less than 2 weeks away. Please register as soon as possible, and the cutoff for registration is next Wednesday, that's October 30th. Registration is free, and this includes lunch. Once you have registered, you will be able to register for the individual breakout sessions. So make sure that you watch next week's podcast episode because I'll walk you through that process. It's really easy, and you can do it directly from our website. But before you register for the sessions, you need to register for the entire conference. I'd like to take a few minutes to go through these individual sessions. And I mentioned the topics before, but I'd like to go into more detail here. There are 2 sessions that everyone will attend. The first is right after registration, and the second is during lunch. The first will be with Reverend Dwight Ford of the Martin Luther King Center. Reverend Ford grew up in Rock Island, and he has a Master's of Divinity degree from Harvard Divinity School and a BA in Business Management and Leadership from Western Illinois University. He served in the Marine Corps and received several medals during his service. He's volunteered his time and talents to many organizations, and he now serves as the King Center Director. And the speaker during lunch is Richard Wallstrand. Mr. Wallstrand is a graduate of Blackhawk College and Drake University, and he has over 30 years of experience in various human resources positions at Deere Davenport Works, including 15 years in workforce development. And he is a former elected director of the Bettendorf Community School District and a current adjunct instructor at Blackhawk College and Kirkwood Community College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. There will be 3 sessions for the topic of preparing yourself for an interview at different points during the day. The first session will be with Amanda Mason, and Amanda works in human resources for Hahn. We're trying to secure a speaker for the second slot for preparing yourself for an interview. I have somebody I think that's lined up, but I'm going to hold off on giving you their name until I'm for sure. The third session of preparing yourself for an interview is with Bernice Connolly Reveal. And Bernice is the vocational evaluator for Boss Ed, and she was previously a transition specialist assistant, the same position as Carrie and Gary. One of the sessions is entitled Student Success, and this session is with Dylan Iverson. He's a senior from Sherrard High School, and Dylan has been in the STEP program for about a year and a half. And in that time, he has applied for 9 jobs, and he's been hired for 7 of them. And he's currently working 3 different jobs. So Dylan will talk about the job search process that he follows, from deciding where to apply and to following up with interviews. And we'll have a representative from Blackhawk College and a representative from Carl Sandburg College to speak about the certification programs that their schools offer. Jen Holdorf is the Special Populations Coordinator at Blackhawk College. And in this role, Jen works with the students who are enrolled in career programs to provide academic advising, career advising, financial assistance, tutoring, and study groups for career classes, and assistance with accommodations. And Delana Carlson is the Director of Recruitment at Carl Sandburg College in Galesburg, and Sandburg offers some certification programs that aren't available at Blackhawk, and some of you may be considering Sandburg because you live south of the Quad Cities. Many of you have worked at our skilled development sites or our training sites, and the session Turning Training into Competitive Employment would be a good session for you to attend if you have or are working at a training site. David Brown is the vocational coordinator at Blackhawk Center, and he will be co-presenting on this topic with Doug Fisher, who for many years held that same title as vocational coordinator at Blackhawk Center. These 2 gentlemen have worked with hundreds of students and that have started things off in their careers at a training site. And we have 3 hiring managers from local businesses that will be sitting on an employer panel. Amanda Mason is from Hahn, and she'll be speaking earlier in the day on how to prepare yourself for an interview. And she'll be joined on this panel by Kay Myers from the Hy-Vee in Moline on John Deere Road, and Lisa Johnson, the hiring manager for the Dairy Queen in Silvis. This will be your opportunity to hear what hiring managers are looking for, and there will be plenty of opportunities for you to ask questions. As I mentioned, I will be speaking about social networking and how it can help you get a job and how it can keep you from getting a job. So next week, I will show you how to register for these individual sessions, but first, you need to register for the conference. If you go to qcstep.com, on the right sidebar, you will see the registration button, and there's a video right above it that will walk you through the process.
All I am is a man. I want the world in my hands. I hate the beach, but I stand in California with my toes in the
On episode number 39, I gave you the reasons you should apply for a seasonal retail position. On episode number 40, I told you how to find these positions. On last week's episode, I gave you tips on filling out the online application for these positions. So on this week's episode, I'm going to follow the progression, and I'm going to talk with you about following up on applications after you've submitted them. And this information applies to both online and paper applications. This topic has a lot more gray areas than some of the other topics we have discussed on the podcast and will discuss. There are different strategies and approaches to following up on applications. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to with the Day of Transition 2013 is hearing what the employers on the employer panel have to say about this topic. They are the experts, but here are 4 tips from me on following up with employers. The first tip for following up with an employer is, don't think that following up is pointless. If you want a job, you want to give yourself every advantage you can to get that job. And if following up with an employer will help your chances, it's worth doing. I know that following up with an employer is a difficult thing, and let me share with you my personal story on following up with an employer. When I was in high school, I had applied with a business, and my dad forced me to follow up with the employer. I did not want to do it. I was really shy in high school, and I'm not sure I could have imagined a more terrifying thing to do on a summer day than go follow up on an application and talk with an employer. On my way to the business, I got into a car accident, and it wasn't anything serious, but I obviously used that accident as an excuse not to go on to follow up with the application. Well, at the end of the day, I told my dad the whole story, and he accused me of getting into the car accident on purpose so that I wouldn't have to follow up. It seems like a strong accusation, but considering rather than going on to follow up with the application, I instead went and played baseball with my friends, I can see why he might think that I was up to something. I tell you that story to let you know that you're not alone in being intimidated and even scared to follow up with employers. It is a difficult thing, but every teenager has those same feelings towards following up. And if you're the one that does it, it makes it look like you are confident and motivated, and it will increase your odds of getting that job. I recently saw a study where 94% of employers say it is important to follow up with an employer after submitting a job application. It really does make a difference. The second tip for following up with an employer is, when you turn in the application, find out what is the best method to follow up. If you turn in a paper application, it's a good idea to ask for the hiring manager when you turn it in. If you are able to talk with them, ask them, would you prefer that I follow up through email or through phone? If you're not able to meet with the hiring manager, ask the employee that you give the application to, what is the best way to contact the hiring manager? My advice is to follow up with a phone call unless I tell you something different. The third tip for following up with an employer is respect the employer's requests. If the job application specifically states, no phone calls please, respect the request and don't call. You could actually hurt your chances of being hired if the employer sees you as someone that can't follow clear and simple instructions. In this situation, you may want to consider a handwritten follow-up letter. And the fourth tip for following up with an employer is, don't be a pest. My suggestion is to follow up with an employer about 5 to 7 days after you've turned in the application, or maybe 2 or 3 days after the opening has closed. Hiring managers typically have many other responsibilities, and applications may sit on their desks for a while before they have a chance to look at them, so you will want to give them time. Now, after that second follow-up contact, I would not do any more. You want your name to ring a bell with the employer when they're looking through the applications because you showed initiative, not because you pestered them by calling them 15 times. I mentioned that you can hurt your chances by not following instructions, and you can also hurt your chances by being a nuisance to the employer. As I said at the beginning here, following up with an employer after you apply for a position has a lot of gray areas, and there's no set way of doing things. It depends on the employer and what works best for them. The trick is figuring out what that is. So I know that I didn't answer all of your questions about following up with an employer, but I hope that I gave you a good foundation, and if you attend the day of transition, you can find out from real hiring managers what they prefer. Well, that does it for this week's episode. On next week's episode, I will walk you through the session registration of the day of transition. But remember, you only have until next Wednesday, it's October 30th, to register for the conference. If you have any questions about the conference or registration, email me info@qcstep.com. I understand that it's a little bit confusing because we have two registrations. We have the conference registration and we have the session registration. So we'll worry about the session registration later, but first we need to do the conference thing to get you registered so that we can get our meals ordered and everything like that. And once you have that done, then we'll worry about the sessions. Well, thank you for watching or listening, and I will be back next week with another episode of the QC Step Podcast.